Welcome to the latest episode of the Hunter Baumgardt Sports Podcast. My name is Hunter Baumgardt, your host. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at HunterBOnAir. Feel free to like the Facebook page as well, Hunter Baumgardt Sports. And you can watch or listen to the podcast. You can watch on YouTube or listen on SoundCloud. Simply search Hunter Baumgardt Sports Podcast. Well, the Milwaukee Bucks have made some moves late Monday night into Tuesday morning. They acquire Bogdanovich, they acquire Drew Holiday, and they are making moves to hopefully go for a championship this season. And I wanted to talk Bucks on this week's podcast because they made the moves, so I reached out to J.R. Radcliffe from the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. He is their trending sports reporter there, and he also hosts the podcast for both the Brewers and the Bucks for Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. And so I'm like, you know what? Let's get his thoughts on these Bucks deals, and he is joining me today. So we're going to talk about both deals for Holiday and Bogdanovich and kind of what this means for Budenholzer. Does this put more of a spotlight on him? What will Giannis do? Does he think this makes has a better chance now of Giannis signing that Supermax deal? So all that and more right here with J.R. Radcliffe. Joining me this week on the Hunter Baumgardt Sports Podcast, happy to have J.R. Radcliffe joining me from the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. He is their trending sports reporter. He also hosts the Brewers and Bucks podcasts for the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel as well. You can follow him on Twitter at J.R. Radcliffe. J.R., really appreciate the time and excited to talk about these new Bucks moves today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I hope things are going well over there. And yeah, it's kind of a crazy time. I don't know if we thought coming into the week that the Bucks would be this active, but here we are, and they've kind of refashioned everything. And suddenly there's a renewed interest in in NBA basketball in Milwaukee.
Yeah, exactly. Which I think not a lot, a lot of people I think were kind of like, are we going to be disappointed again where they don't make a move or something like that? And they just kind of go into next year with the same team. But I think, that's obviously not the case. What was your first kind of reaction when you heard the news Monday night that they were trading for Drew Holiday and what they gave up as well?
I mean, my first reaction is I gotta wake up because I had I wasn't asleep, but I was close to it, looked on my phone and saw a couple messages and saw that it was happening. It's pretty rare, or at least maybe as a sports fan, you're just trained to think this way, that when deals make a lot of sense and you hear about a name and you think, man, it'd be great if, the local team gets that guy. It just never seems to work out. And then you have a situation really with both these guys where they both were really good fits, and especially with Drew Holiday, a guy that I know a lot of Bucks fans were talking about, thinking about. I mean, he really is exactly what they would be looking for if you look back at this team, and particularly, I mean, I really like Eric Bledsoe and think he's been a really good player, was a real big part of their turnaround as a franchise from being just a sort of fringe playoff team to being a legitimate contender for the title, but easy to see in the playoffs where one of their weaknesses was, and that was with Bledsoe. He just wasn't able to deliver kind of a next level performance in the playoffs. So to get the guy that is essentially Eric Bledsoe but better, pretty similar defensively. Eric Bledsoe's an elite defender, so Drew Holiday's in that category, but much more of an offensive option. A better shooter, better playmaker, a guy who's going to do everything that the Bucks want him to do. They paid a really high price for him, and it's hard to shake that. I'm still, every now and then I keep thinking, wow, it's such a good deal. And then it's like, oh my gosh, but it cost them, essentially 5 first-round draft picks. Probably won't be that bad, but something in that neighborhood. That's a lot, but they're obviously committed to keeping Giannis here, and that requires sort of, not just improving around the fringes, not just making sure the bench is a little bit better, or maybe your fifth start is a little bit better. Now they've got a lineup full of all-stars, and that's what you need when you get into the postseason.
Exactly, and that's what we're kind of seeing around the NBA as well, with all these quote super teams and a lot of talent flocking to each other. And now the Bucks, not necessarily super team, but now they have a very solid, if not the best, starting 5 top to bottom in the starting lineup. Then you heard the rumors that Bogdanovich was being traded for from the Kings, the sign and trade deal there that ended up happening. What was kind of reaction and first thoughts about that deal?
Yeah, just as I'm finishing up helping out with the holiday stuff, I pulled together some Twitter reaction, things like that. Just as we've hit send, it's on the website. The news that Bogdanovich the sign and trade is coming. That's interesting one, because it's interesting that the news is out there, because sign and trades, we shouldn't know that information yet, according to the letter of the law by the NBA tampering rules. So somebody leaked that information. it honestly, like, I didn't think logistically it would make sense. I didn't think it could work. You know, the Bucks are up
Mm.
against the cap, and they are now. I mean,
Yeah.
they're gonna have a hard time filling out their roster, but it seemed like that was going to be too much of a commitment, financial commitment, because to pull that off, you have to, there's two things. You have to give at least a 3-year deal to Bogdanovich. Only the first year will be
Mm.
guaranteed, but you still, you know, you have to sign him, and he's not going to come cheap. He's a restricted free agent from the Sacramento Kings. So
Mm.
there's that. And then you also wind up, there's a lot of salary cap minutia to weed through, but you do what's called hard capping yourself. You set it such that by using that sign and trade mechanism, you can't go over a certain dollar amount now as you're building out your payroll for the next season. And that's going to limit them. It's going to limit their ability to use the full exceptions that are available to you, roster exceptions. Long story short, it just limits what they can do financially
Yeah.
more than just pure salary. So that's a huge risk because of that. But at the same time, you know, this is a guy they absolutely need, a 6'6" guy who can shoot the ball, shoot the lights out. He's an exciting playmaker. I remember he had a game-winning shot against the Bucks not that long ago. I mean, he's absolutely that last missing ingredient. And yeah, you look at that starting five. I don't know if I'd call it the best starting five in the league, but I don't have an automatic, you know, I don't have a team that I would say, yeah, this group is better than the five guys that the Bucks have right now. A little bit of an about face. You know, they went 1 through 13 last year, tried to build the deepest, best team
Yeah.
they could, and that served them very well for the last 2 regular seasons. They're the best team in the regular season 2 years in a row, but they didn't get to, you know, the NBA finals. So now now they're going to try maybe a little bit different approach, have a veteran bench, not worry about getting that great record, and just getting the playoffs and seeing what happens then.
Yeah, that's very true. And does this, because obviously they gave up, a lot of their bench depth, Dante going to the Kings along with, DJ Wilson and Ersan as well. Does this, we've heard a lot about the depth over the last couple of years, as you mentioned with this team, they're really deep, that can help. Do you think this specifically though, and you kind of mentioned it there, was kind of a move for the postseason as opposed to the regular season?
I mean, absolutely.
Okay.
The Bucks, I think it's arguable. Certainly, had they not made these moves, I don't think you could safely say they're the best team in the East anymore. I think with the moves they've made, you could call them that. I think it's at least arguable because we don't really know what the Nets are going to look like. We don't know what a lot of teams are going to look like, but the Heat obviously bring a lot of their talent back. You still have to deal with teams like the Celtics and the Raptors and maybe the 76ers, although I guess I wouldn't be as worried about them. But in any event, they're still a playoff team. They are still 100% a top 5 team in the East, no matter what. So at some point, this franchise looks at itself and says, look, we gotta keep our superstar. We know that having the best record in the regular season doesn't do us a whole lot of good. We've done it 2 years in a row. There's no trophies for it, So that's not going to be the goal anymore. Yeah, 100% that they're thinking bigger now. They're not thinking about getting to the postseason. That ship has sailed for the current iteration of the Milwaukee Bucks. So yeah, they're looking bigger picture. Bench wise, might take a hit. They're not going to be able to bring as much off the bench, but the bench didn't serve them in the postseason. Guys struggled, but it also just the concept of the way the team was built, limiting the minutes of the starters, like that doesn't work when you get to the postseason. You have to have dudes who can make plays and match up with with defenses that are physical and stuff like that. So yeah, this is a new dawn for the Bucks.
Yeah, it definitely seems that way. J.R. Radcliffe joining me on the Hunter Baumgardt Sports Podcast. He is the trending sports reporter for the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. You can find him on the Brewers and Bucks podcast as well for the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. Follow him on Twitter at J.R. Radcliffe. Now, going back to the Jrue Holiday deal specifically, and we talked about it a little bit with the draft picks, do you think they gave up too much to get Jrue Holiday, considering they sent away 3 first-round picks, 2 swap picks, and then, of course, George Hill and Eric Bledsoe?
I think you can make that argument. I personally would suggest not.
Okay.
Because at this point, I do think Giannis is going to sign the Supermax. Maybe it isn't right on November 22nd. Maybe it is. Seems to be a lot of rumblings that could be the case. Maybe it is before the season, and maybe it's not. And if it isn't, there's going to be a lot of hand wringing, because if Giannis leaves, then this was a terrible misfire, because you're going to have some lottery picks in that group of 5 picks. Right now it's 3 first rounders to the Pelicans, and then the right to swap draft picks in 2 other drafts. Well, if the Bucks have Giannis, they're I mean, at worst, they're going to be picking like 20th, like
Yeah,
they're
right.
at the bottom 10 pick in the first round. So I went back and looked at the last decade's worth of drafts. There's a couple names, Bogdanovich is one of them. Kyle Kuzma, Pascal Siakam is a really good one. There are a few names that rise up from that bottom 10 in the first round, but more likely than not, you're talking about role players. You're talking about guys that the Bucks aren't interested in. If they have Giannis, then they're improving through veterans. They might draft a guy here and there, but that's not going to be the primary way that team gets better. If they're lottery picks, yeah, you know what? You're in big trouble. But if you're the Bucks front office, you're also not even thinking about that, because if Giannis leaves, the house of cards falls down anyway.
Right.
Who cares if you're in a rut for the next 5 years? You were destined for that anyway. It's not going to be the same general manager. I mean, there's going to be a lot of changes. So like this, it may be that the Bucks felt like this was the only solution to take these big swings and a path forward, and way overpay, because you have to do everything you can to keep Giannis. And if you do, these picks, they're not as valuable as maybe they sound when you say first round picks. It seems like in basketball, like football teams hold on to those first round picks like they're absolute gold. I think in basketball, once you get below the top 20 picks, you can maybe be a little more flexible that way. So, so like with the caveat, if Giannis stays, no, I don't think they give up too much. They did everything they should have here. If he goes, I mean, it's going to be a long 5, 6, 7 years for Milwaukee Bucks basketball, either way you slice it. So
yeah,
might as well just go all the way down to the bottom and see what happens on the other side.
Yeah, no, that's very true. And if you're Giannis, and let's say, like you went to the front office, you said, all right, get me all the pieces you can to go win a championship. Are these two moves enough, do you think, to convince him, okay, I got to stay. This is the front office is doing what I want them to do?
I mean, this is a demonstration they're doing everything they can, certainly. And like we just talked about, mortgaging their future because they believe in Giannis as their present, as their future. I have no doubt that Giannis is aware of what the front office is doing. I don't think these moves were made without his consultation in some way, shape, or form. Maybe not specifically, but certainly these are things that they're doing, with Giannis in mind. Everything is through the lens of keeping him. So, I'm sure that these moves are made in concert with the idea of keeping him. The thing we don't know right now is, did the Bucks get assurance from Giannis that, you make those moves, I'll sign the Supermax. We will probably know that within a week or two, November 22nd being that date. But if not, like I just said, it's still worth possibly pursuing, just saying, look, we're doing everything we can. And they absolutely had to show it this offseason, with Giannis holding the leverage. So I think everybody's going to breathe easier if he just, puts ink to paper.
Yeah, right.
And then it's very clear, okay, the Bucks knew 100% that this was going to happen. If they did this, that'll make a lot more sense. So I know Bucks fans will relax if that happens. And if not, it's going to be a nervous year of basketball.
No, yeah, you're exactly right. And I think a lot of fans, like you said, just breathe easier once that contract is hopefully signed soon. Specifically with Drew Holiday, a lot of people have been saying this is a great fit for this team, just the way he plays, as a veteran as well. Do you agree with that sentiment that this is just a great fit into what the Bucks want to do?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think he is probably a better version of Eric Bledsoe, a little bit more offensively gifted version of that. And Eric Bledsoe worked for the Bucks, regular season wise. Again, we're talking about the best team in the NBA the last 2 seasons, and Bledsoe's defense, I think, ended up being his calling card. But I mean, I do think that this is certainly a better version of him, and that's a good sign considering that guy did work. He worked in this system, so. Seems like a great character guy as well, Drew Holiday. You see 30 years old, you might think, okay, that's getting up there for somebody that you're going to sell the farm for, but it's also not elderly by NBA standards yet either. So I think this will be a great fit. I have no doubt that the Bucks are going to be humming along just like they have been.
And, one of the last questions I have for you is, to kind of the random viewer at home that's kind of watching a Bucks basketball game, on a night in February or even in the postseason. But with these 2 additions of Bogdanovich and with Holiday, what do you see as kind of the biggest difference that we might see as fans or, as reporters just on the floor? Do you think it'll be more smooth? What on the defensive side, offensive side, what kind of do you see as a difference? Because we've kind of seen the same team for the last couple of years. And do you think it'll look maybe a little bit different? Obviously, obviously it will with new players, but what do you think is kind of those glaring things that might look different to the fan?
I mean, that's a good question. I don't know. They've been so good on both ends of the floor. So
Yeah.
I don't know if you can necessarily expect it to look better or different. I think
Hmm.
what might be different is the Bucks might lose more games, oddly enough, with the better
Mm,
starting five and with a number of guys that are filling out the bench on veteran minimums and
mm.
like they don't have a lot of money to spend here, so they're going to
Right.
have to sort of bargain shop to a degree. I think they're going to be games where the Bucks just say, you know what, it's just not that big a deal. You know that Coach Mike Budenholzer is going to rest guys whenever he can. Giannis notoriously didn't play as many minutes as a lot of the superstars in the league. Theoretically, that saves him for the end of the year. It didn't necessarily play out that way, but same with Middleton, same with all five of the starters. So
Mm.
I think it's possible that they actually take a step back in the win-loss column, but that doesn't mean that they take a step back as a team. They're going to be a better team and certainly one more equipped to compete in the postseason. Um, I mean, I think kind of part of the fun here is figuring out who's going to fill out this roster. I think it's possible it's a lot
Yeah.
of guys, a lot of name guys that maybe
Hmm.
just are commanding a lower salary these days. You look at a list of possibilities and it's sort of like, I mean, DeMarcus Cousins, is that a guy, or Paul Millsap, or the Morris
Right.
twins? Like, there's a lot of random, interesting directions that the Bucks can go at this point.
Mm.
So, it might be a little choppy overall. It might not be that 1-13 situation where they're the deepest team in the league anymore. But I certainly think it's going to be pretty in the postseason, and that's obviously what Bucks fans are hoping for at this point.
For sure. And with this talent now on this team, does this put more of a spotlight on Mike Budenholzer now that you have this, this great starting five? If he's not able to get this team to the NBA Finals even this year, is this going to put a big spotlight then on Budenholzer, even more than what, fans at least were putting last year?
Yeah, I think the spotlight went kind of full tilt on him just this past
Hmm.
season. I mean, he'd sort of been. I mean, it was a full-fledged honeymoon period. New coach comes in, you win 60 games, and then go back to you're the top seed in the East a second year in a row. What's not to
Hmm.
like about that? But now it starts to feel a little bit like a trend. A couple of years they bow out, then you go back to his days in Atlanta, fairly or unfairly, it all starts to add up a little bit. So,
Hmm.
yeah, I think the spotlight is already on him. I mean, there you do have to ask, like, if there are those who want the Bucks to go another direction, like, is there
Hmm.
another coach out there that's going to justify replacing the coach? Are you going to find a much more talented presence? And B, then, because you're going to be paying Mike Budenholzer, for the duration
Yeah.
of his contract, you have to also justify the financial aspect of it. I know people contending for championships don't want to think about the financial aspect, but I do think there's still a lot to love about Mike Budenholzer. He's got a system that works, and it does seem like these guys would fit fine in that system. Both of them
Hmm.
can shoot the ball. Like I said, Holiday's basically a better Bledsoe. I mean, this shouldn't be a shock to the system at all.
Hmm.
But yeah, of course, if this team doesn't go to the NBA Finals at some point here, that's going to be a black mark on Budenholzer's career, because at this point, he's got a two-time MVP playing for him, and four guys with a lot of All-Star game, on their
Hmm.
resume. That's run. It's you start to quickly run out of reasons why this team shouldn't be in the NBA Finals, shouldn't be winning a championship. So yeah, big season for him.
Absolutely. Last question for you, as we kind of look at who might fill out this team. You mentioned a couple of players there who weren't on the Bucks last year. Do you see them maybe, even though Robin Lopez and Wes Matthews are both free agents, them maybe coming back now that maybe they see what happened, but also just because they want to still be a part of this team?
I think that's really interesting. I am interested to know what happens there. Wes Matthews
Hmm.
is gonna make more money than he did last year. He was on a minimum deal. He should be making $3 million or more this year. I don't know if the Bucks can afford that. I think he would
Mm.
be great to have, but Wes would also have to accept a lesser role essentially. I mean, he's a starter
Yeah.
last year, and obviously a defensive stopper and can do many things well. He's a great basketball player. Uh,
Hmm.
I don't know if he's going to want that in Milwaukee. Even if he is getting paid a little bit more. Robin Lopez is an interesting case. Was surprised he opted out, and it might have to do
Yeah.
with these trades, like maybe that it prevents him from being caught up in these trades, and he can sort of
Hmm.
choose his adventure here going forward.
That's true.
Again, money wise, I don't know if he provides enough that the Bucks would want to pay him, but he is, as a backup big, obviously he's Brook Lopez's twin brother. He does some of the things Brook Lopez does defensively, so
Hmm.
you can't discount that. That was a really seamless fit for them. So I would personally wager that we're more likely to see Robin Lopez back than Wes Matthews. It would be great for the Bucks to get both, one or both,
Mhm.
and so that it's not just a complete sea of new names when you come back for the new season.
Yeah.
But Wes is going to be tough. I think he's going to get paid a lot of money to go someplace else and be a
Mm.
good fit somewhere. He's going to fit wherever he goes. So that one's a little bit tougher, but I'm sure the Bucks are going to give it a shot.
Yeah, I think so too. Well, JR, really appreciate the time today, especially on short notice with these Bucks moves. And I'll have to have you on again sometime to talk about the Brewers or the Bucks, because this is a lot of
Sure.
fun.
Yeah, it's great to talk about it when you don't get to go to games. We don't get to.
Right.
The timeline is weird. There's a November draft on Wednesday
Yeah,
night. I don't know what that's about, but yeah, it's great to talk. We'll do it again.
for sure. Thanks so much, JR. That is J.R. Radcliffe. You can follow him on Twitter at J.R. Radcliffe, RADCLIFFE. And he is their trending sports reporter at the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. He also hosts the Brewers and Bucks podcasts for the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel as well, which I listened to right after those trades were made. It would have been Tuesday with him and Matt Velazquez, the Bucks beat reporter for the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. And so that was fantastic as well. So highly suggest those podcasts as well. After, of course, you listen to the Hunter Baumgardt Sports Podcast. No, just kidding. But he does a fantastic job and really great insight into kind of where the Bucks are and some interesting points, especially about Mike Budenholzer. And then, of course, with Giannis. And here are my thoughts on it. I think I was excited when I saw these deals. Obviously, it's a lot to give up. It's a couple main points. One is, in Wisconsin sports, we talked about this with the trade deadline when Evan Heffelfinger joined me a couple of weeks ago, and we talked about the Packers didn't make a move at the trade deadline, right? And you have Aaron Rodgers, and why aren't you making a move at the trade deadline? I am so glad that the Bucks are going all in on this opportunity with Giannis, with Budenholzer, with the guy, with Chris Middleton, with their core. They are going for it. And the fact that is the case, and the fact that you put Drew Holiday on this team and Bogdanovich, who both really, really fit well into this system, and show Giannis that you're going for it, and also show the fans that you're going for it, that you're not settling for these last couple years of getting the 1 seed, but then bowing out before the finals, 1 year in the second round, 1 year in the Eastern Conference Finals. You are showing your team and your fans and everybody involved, that we're going for it here. This is our opportunity. We got to seize the moment. And I think that is something that as Wisconsin sports fans, we desire so much. And so, and we haven't seen it with the Packers necessarily. And I get that going all in the NFL is different than going all in the NBA. I mean, there's so many more players. They're different sports. I understand that. But you can still go all in by maybe trading up in the first round and not picking Jordan Love, and maybe picking a wide receiver, or, doing something else that can get your team to the next level. I think that just some of this with the Packers, we talked about it, that, I get that going all in the NFL and the NBA can be different, but still there are moves, or maybe it's a couple of moves to go all in the NFL that Wisconsin sports fans, we want so bad, right? And I think we deserve, and I think the team deserves, Rodgers deserves it, Giannis deserves it, and to a certain extent, Christian Yelich is going to deserve it. And so I think, when you have these 3 MVPs, you want your teams to go all in. You want your teams to be able to compete for a championship every year, and the Bucks just made moves to try and do that. I think getting rid of Bledsoe, was a good idea. I think Eric Bledsoe is a guy who unfortunately just didn't perform in the postseason. You need guys who could perform in the postseason. Both Holiday and Bogdanovich can do that. And so George Hill, I think, is a big loss. I think not only on the court, he was very, very good in the postseason, but also just in that locker room. He was a leader. He was big in the in the Orlando bubble when they decided to protest. I mean, that loss in that locker room is going to be felt, obviously. And then a guy, DJ Wilson and Ersan, I can live without. Dante DiVincenzo is going to be a good player. That's a guy who you get rid of, you get Bogdanovich back. But man, I think that he's going to be a good player with the Kings, and he might get more of an opportunity with the Kings. We'll see. But I think he's going to be a good player. So when I look at across the spectrum, I think, kind of your biggest losses are going to be, Bledsoe maybe during the regular season, George Hill in the locker room, and then Dante DiVincenzo, a rising player on your team. But Are we looking for rising players on our team, or are you looking for the Bucks to win a championship right now? And not really. Who cares if we develop for later, right? Who cares if you develop later? Who cares if the Bucks develop for the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years right now? Obviously, with Giannis, if he signs a deal, it's going to be a long-term deal. So you're going to want to compete for those years, and Dante could have been a big part of that. But I think if you're going for it right now, which it looks like they are, they're going to, like JR said, Bogdanovich has to sign a 3-year deal. He'll be here for a few years, and we'll see what Drew Holiday does. But I think overall, you show you're going for it. You show that absolutely it's win now mode, and I think that's big for not only the fans, but also, of course, Giannis. And I do expect Giannis to now sign the Supermax. I don't think the Bucks make that deal to give away 3 first-round picks and 2 swap picks and think that Giannis is not going. I think they're 99, if not 100% sure that Giannis is going to sign. He could even do it by the time I talk to you on the next podcast. So we shall see. This is going to be a very, very interesting time to be a Bucks fan. Hopefully we'll breathe a sigh of relief soon with Giannis. But either way, I'm excited for the deals. I'm excited that they're going in win now mode. It's exciting for a franchise to be in that mode. And so, yeah, this should be good. I'm excited for these moves. So hopefully you enjoyed the podcast. JR was awesome. Thanks again to JR RADCLIFFE for joining me, especially on short notice with these Bucks deals. And I'll talk to you next week. Remember, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at HunterBOnAir for all the updates on when the podcast will be released, etc., who I'm having on the podcast, previews, what have you. Also, you can like the Facebook page, Hunter Baumgardt Sports. And remember, you can watch or listen to the podcast. You could watch on YouTube or listen on SoundCloud. Simply search Hunter Baumgardt Sports Podcast. Enjoy the rest of your week. Packers-Colts coming up on Sunday afternoon. Should be a good one. Both teams coming in very good this year. Colts 6-3 from what I remember, and then the Packers 7-2. These two teams should be a good one in Indy, and the Colts are going to be tough. They beat the good Titans team last week pretty handily, so they're in a good spot and facing former Badgers running back Jonathan Taylor as well. 3:25 on Sunday. Packers against the Colts. It'd be Joe Buck, Troy Aikman on the call on Fox. Thanks so much for joining me. Talk to you next week. And as always, stay positive.